the perfect couple.
Until a gruesome attack propels their life into tragedy.
Report police. What's your emergency?
Somebody tried to kill my boyfriend.
He was stabbed over 60 times.
This is the worst crime scene that I've ever seen in my career as a police officer.
He said, yo, they bodied Spinks.
But was the line of fire intended for someone else?
An individual was stalking her.
Oh, follow me.
I could not believe what I was reading. Just confusion, shock.
The plan was simple. Find the boyfriend, take him out, get the girl.
Somebody looks at you. What can you do?
Or were there other, more deplorable factors at play?
He could not have verbalized those words with the damage that was done to his throat.
They came up with this pact. There was only violence.
January 2010. Residents in Shreveport, Louisiana are enjoying the fresh start of a new decade.
Shreveport is a wonderful place to live. It's a little laid back. We've got a lot of military influence because there's a military base in the adjoining city.
Just outside Shreveport is one of the largest Air Force bases in the world.
Shreveport is home of the Barksdale Air Force Base and is a place where you have friendly people and exciting entertainment.
However, the lively entertainment in Shreveport can come at a price.
Shreveport's very vibrant. Nightlife also comes with a lot of violent crime throughout the nights. There's continual shootings, robberies that kept the city a lot of times not very safe.
Around 4 a.m. on January 17th, a night of typical Shreveport revelry is coming to an end. But one couple's worst nightmare is just beginning.
Report police. What's your emergency?
Somebody tried to kill my boyfriend.
I gotta kill your boyfriend?
Oh, God.
The frantic caller identifies herself as 26-year-old Kamithia Coleman.
She stated her boyfriend, Brian Spinks, and herself had been viciously attacked.
She said that a man came into her boyfriend's apartment and stabbed him several times.
Okay, is he still there?
Yes, and this was, I was fighting Mom.
She tried to fight off the attacker, but he stabbed her too.
She sustained injuries as a result, but her boyfriend, Brian, sustained much more severe injuries.
911 operators can hear Brian's voice in the background, so there's still a chance to save him if they move quickly.
Oh. Baby, are you okay? Please help me.
Miss Coleman calling 911 was very, very emotional and crying, screaming.
Okay, I need you to calm down. We're getting police there.
First responders are immediately en route to the scene. But while on the call, the operator can hear Brian's moans become faint and eventually stop.
Say something! Brian! Say something to me, please!
29-year-old Brian Spinks was destined for a life of service to his country.
Brian came from a military family. His grandfather was in the Air Force. My father was in the Army in World War II. Myself, I was in the Marine Corps.
Brian sought to follow his father's footsteps. After graduating high school, he immediately enlisted in the U.S. Air Force.
I was proud that my son decided to follow in military footsteps of his forebears.
Brian loved being in the Air Force and serving his country.
Brian immediately built a reputation as a person who would always go the extra mile for others and show up for his friends and fellow servicemen.
No matter who they were or where they were from, Brian was a man with an open heart and open arms.
Brian also prided himself on being a dedicated father to his 2 children.
There's a lot on him as far as, juggling his time, but Brian really loved his kids, and he really put in a lot of effort to make sure that they were well taken care of.
With his skill and reputation, it didn't take Brian long to earn a promotion to staff sergeant.
Brian was well on his way, climbing the ladder of the military ranks.
After almost 10 years of service, with 4 deployments and 2 tours in Iraq, Brian found himself stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana.
It was there Brian met someone who'd change his life forever. 24-year-old Camethea Coleman.
Ooh, man, it's chilly out here tonight.
I know, right?
While at a house party in 2008, destiny struck, and Brian met Camethea. She was different from any woman he'd ever met before.
So you're in the military?
Yeah, Air Force,
Well, I love a man in uniform.
The sparks just kind of flew from there.
Brian was immediately drawn to her. Camethea was the perfect combination of brains and sexy.
I have a career in social work. It's what I've always wanted to do since I was a little girl.
Wow, that's great.
She attended Grambling State University, where she earned a degree.
She wanted to help others in their lives, and that was something that Brian could relate to. And it didn't take Brian long to become completely head over heels smitten with her.
They began dating not too long after that first meeting.
Soon enough, Brian was proudly introducing Camethea to his loved ones.
He just lit up when he, talked about the possibility of getting to start building a relationship with her, and he was excited about that.
Well, Dad, this is Camethea.
Oh my gosh, very nice to meet you.
You too, sir.
All right.
She's the first young lady I ever met. She and I connected quite a bit. And I just knew, and he told me, that she was something special.
Brian felt like Camethea completed him in many ways, and to everybody else, they were the perfect couple.
Yeah, she's great.
We were excited for him because we had never really seen him in a real, long-term type of relationship. So I was happy that he met somebody he could potentially see a future with.
I was amazed at how she lit the light bulb in him. This was the one.
But now, the couple's promising future is at risk of being cut short as police and EMS race to Brian's apartment in response to a violent stabbing. They know time is of the essence if they're going to save Brian's life.
As authorities arrive, they come across a grotesquely violent scene.
Camethea is covered in blood, and Brian is even more blood-soaked.
Camethea is crying hysterically.
While paramedics attempt to revive Brian, officers tend to Camethea.
They are asking if she could recall anything about the attacker so that they could, try to catch up with him before he would get too far.
Where's he at? What's he look like? What's he look like, man?
Camethea is just hysterical. She's bleeding, and she couldn't answer any of their questions.
Police are concerned there is a violent man on the loose, but with such few details, they fear he will get away.
Who is this man, and why did he want to harm this young couple?
After spending nearly a decade in the Air Force, 29-year-old Brian Spinks was a young staff sergeant looking forward to the bright future ahead of him.
Brian just wanted to be the best person he could be, the best airman he could be, and the best father he could be.
And his future looked even brighter with his new girlfriend, Camethea Coleman, by his side.
Brian was crazy about that young lady.
So we were all happy for him.
But on January 17th, 2010, first responders have been called to Brian's apartment after a panicked 911 call from Camethea.
Brian is losing blood fast.
They've both been stabbed by an intruder.
Man, tell me what he looks like. Blackout. That's all we got right now.
First responders do everything they can to revive Brian. Unfortunately, though, their work is futile.
Despite their best efforts, first responders were unable to revive Brian. He was pronounced dead on the scene, and this home invasion has now become a murder investigation.
Will Camethea suffer a similar fate?
She has been stabbed 5 times, twice in the abdomen, once on each leg and on one hand.
They quickly take her to the hospital for more treatment.
Meanwhile, homicide detectives arrive to begin their investigation.
As we entered the house and began looking at the victim, we noticed that he had received multiple stab wounds.
Brian's body is covered in stab wounds, over 60 to be exact.
Stab wounds all around the neck. Definitely overkill.
There were multiple stab wounds on his chest and arms.
But 2 wounds in particular stand out to the detectives. A deep stab wound at the base of Brian's neck, and a slash across his throat.
He had received a laceration from one ear to the other across his throat.
Obviously, whoever did this did not intend to just rough him up. They intended to kill him.
Blood spatter can be found all over the apartment.
This is the worst crime scene that I've ever seen in my career as a police officer.
By the looks of this gruesome scene, it's clear that the assailant was relentless.
As detectives continue to process the crime scene, they find not 1, but 2 murder weapons.
We noticed the 2 knives laying next to the victim. One of the knife blades was broken.
Most likely, the first knife broke during the midst of all the stabbing, and the second knife was used to finish the job.
As we began reviewing the rest of the residence, we noticed that there were 2 missing knives from the knife block in the kitchen, and the knives that were used to kill the victim appeared to be the same make of the knives that were in the kitchen block.
But what was the killer's motive?
It could not have been robbery because everything in the apartment that was valuable was undisturbed.
There was only violence. Whoever had done this seemed to have a serious grudge against Brian.
When the tragic news reaches Brian's loved ones, they're in disbelief.
They told me that my son has been the victim of a homicide. And immediately denial set in because I started trying to differentiate. Homicide means he's dead. I didn't know the exact details other than my son was deceased, and I had to get that in to my heart some way.
I had a whole bunch of missed phone calls, and one of the voicemails was from one of our friends that was stationed with us at the base. And I called him back, and he was like, he said, they bodied Spinks. He was like, turn on your computer. And that's when I saw the news article online. And it was just like, stomach dropped. I could not believe what I was reading. Just confusion, shock, sadness.
As one team of investigators continues processing the scene, another begins canvassing the neighborhood for leads.
Brian's neighbor tells detectives that she thought Brian and Camethea were a lovely couple, and she'd never had any problems with them outside of the occasional loud party.
But last night was different.
The neighbor remembered being awoken due to screaming and yelling.
She was awoken by a commotion around 3:15 that morning. She heard yelling back and forth, but she really couldn't make out the words.
She didn't actually see anything helpful, and neither did anyone else in the neighborhood.
Except for Camethea.
She was really the key to unlocking what happened.
We needed to speak to Camethea Coleman immediately to get more details.
And fortunately, Detectives soon receive word that Camethea is ready to talk.
Detective Bowen. She's good to go?
They are notified she's in stable condition.
Luckily, her wounds are not fatal.
So once Ms. Coleman was brought from the hospital, she was brought into the detective office.
When detectives meet with Camethea, she is clearly still shaken up. But she says she has something very important to tell them.
She says she knows exactly who killed Brian.
I saw him earlier that day. Saw him riding by.
Camethea reveals she has a stalker, and he is the one who did this.
Winter of 2010, Shreveport homicide detectives are investigating the brutal slaying of 29-year-old Brian Spinks.
He was stabbed over 60 times with his own kitchen knife. Obviously, whoever did this didn't intend to injure him. They intended to kill him.
Brian's girlfriend, Camethea Coleman, was also stabbed during the attack, but has survived.
Now Camethea is telling the investigators that she knew the attacker.
She was so distraught and emotional at the scene, but now that her mind has settled and she's calmed down, she in fact did recognize the attacker.
I saw him earlier that day. Saw him riding by.
She advised that an individual was stalking her.
What's this guy's name?
John. He said his name was John.
You know what John's last name was? Describe John for me.
He's dark. He's probably like a little taller than me.
She told police that she'd met him at a club a while back.
We were talking, but I told him there would never be anything because I was with Brian.
According to Camethea, John wouldn't take no for an answer.
He was aggressively trying to pursue her, and he'd been following her.
He got the picture, but then he showed back up. He would pop up like in crazy places.
In fact, Camethea says on the afternoon of January 16th, John popped up outside her apartment.
So this is before about 2 or 3 in the afternoon?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did he say anything to you? You just saw him or what? Did y'all talk? Be strong for me, girl, okay? We gotta find out.
Through tears, Camethea tells detectives John didn't say anything to her that afternoon, but later that night, she still couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched.
She'd been out club hopping with her friends, and as the bars began to close, she decided it might be best to go to Brian's house to go to sleep, as she often did when she was out late.
I missed you.
We went over to his apartment. I know. It's painful, okay? But I'm here for you. Tell me what happened when you got to the apartment.
When I got there, we were just talking.
Until the night took a frightening turn.
Suddenly, a man burst through the door. Camethea said she immediately recognized him as John.
Oh, follow me.
Camethea says when John arrived, she was alarmed, but she never could have imagined what happened next.
And I was like, what are you doing here? He went to the kitchen.
That's when John started stabbing Brian.
John, get out! What are you doing?
What?
Get out!
What the hell are you doing, bro? No.
Get out! And he got the knife and he just started jabbing.
Camethea says she was in shock as she watched the violence unfold.
I was looking at John. I was like, get the fuck out of here.
But John was relentless.
The first knife broke during the midst of all the stabbing.
Then he was just using one knife and was stabbing Brian repeatedly. Camethea said she then knew she had to do something.
Brian was on the ground, I jumped on him.
Please, no. That's when John turned the knife on her.
As the investigation into the violent murder of Brian Spinks continues, detectives are speaking with his girlfriend, Camethea Coleman, who was also injured during the crime.
Camethea says that her stalker, who she only knows as John, broke into Brian's apartment and began stabbing him.
When Brian was on the ground, I jumped on him, and that's when he stabbed me on my leg. I know I felt a couple of them.
Camethea says at that point, she runs to grab her phone and call 911.
When John saw this, he slit Brian's throat, plunged a knife into his neck, and ran out of the door.
Camethea said with the phone to her ear, she ran to Brian's side.
I was shaking him. I didn't know what to do. I pulled the knife out of Brian.
She removes the knife from his neck, and shortly after, first responders arrive.
Based on the story that Camethea had given detectives, if John had followed her home, it's possible that it was an act of jealousy.
The plan was simple. Find the boyfriend, take him out, get the girl. But detectives know they'll have to investigate further to determine whether or not this was in fact the case.
In their search for more information on the couple, detectives turn to Brian and Camethea's friends, and what they discover is eye-opening.
Camethea had a dark side to her.
Brian had dropped some lines to me about like, hey man, she's, Kim kind of crazy. We started seeing a change in their relationship, and she was being clingy and asking more questions about what he was doing and stuff like that.
What are you talking to, Brian? Talking about?
Camethea always thought that he was looking for another person to be with.
I'm not letting you see my ball. No, stop.
Her behavior over Brian became controlling.
She was becoming more and more compulsive. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, she's in his phone. She's looking under the bed, she's looking in the closet, looking for something that wasn't there.
You're acting crazy!
What did you just call me?
Friends say, despite the tumultuous nature of their relationship, Camethea even began pressuring Brian to get married.
For Brian, this was too much, and he began to feel suffocated in the relationship.
You know, Brian has a son and a daughter, and he was doing his regular Air Force job and school. And he just wanted a little time to himself sometime.
So Brian decided to distance himself from Camethea.
I need some space.
What?
I need some space.
No, you can't.
No, I'm
you
done.
can't leave,
No,
Brian.
no!
But Camethea wasn't having it.
There are times where we've been out and we saw Kim at different places.
She was popping up everywhere. Anytime he and his friends went out for drinks, went out to the club, anything, she was there, and it was quickly becoming a problem.
It was starting to sound like Camethea was the true stalker.
Friends say the situation came to a head on the night of January 16th, the same night Brian was killed.
It was just a regular night. You know, we went downtown, we were having drinks, listening to music.
Brian was in the club, and he was doing what they call the Texas two-step with this young lady. This young lady was the girlfriend of one of Brian's good friends, and her boyfriend is present as well.
But then Camethea showed up.
As soon as Camethea came face to face with the woman, all hell broke loose.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Stop it.
My man.
They couldn't believe that she had started a fight in the club.
Camethea Coleman has told Shreveport detectives that her boyfriend, Brian Spinks, was killed by her jealous stalker, who she only knows as John. But now detectives are wondering if the true stalker is Camethea.
He was trying to separate himself. She was trying to control him.
Brian's friends say Camithia's possessive behavior came to a head on the night of his death.
Brian had gone out with some of his friends. Everyone was drinking. And then Miss Coleman appeared at that establishment.
She saw Brian hanging out with another woman who was actually just a friend and completely lost it.
What the hell you think you're doing? This is my man, and you better stay away from him.
Camithia began screaming at her to stay away from Brian.
Don't tell me to relax. Don't tell me to relax. No, I knew you was cheating on me, Brian.
People were trying to calm her down, telling her to relax. And we pulled her off to the side and we're like, hey man, chill out. Like, we're all having a good time. He cares about you, he loves you. Just relax.
Don't tell me to relax. Don't tell me to relax.
Camithia had clearly gone off the handle, and it didn't go unnoticed by Brian.
No, Brian.
I'm done.
No, you're not done.
That's
We're
it.
not done. Don't you walk away from me, Brian. It's not over. Don't walk away. Get off of me. Get off of me.
He had had enough of that type of reaction from her. And I think he just was fed up with it and was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. At that point, Brian told one of my friends, like, look, just take me home.
On the ride home, Brian decided to end his relationship with Camithia for good.
Brian's friend stated that he had left a voicemail saying, I am done with you.
After speaking with Brian's friends, detectives think they now know the real reason Camithia went over to Brian's house that night.
If Brian finally pulled the plug on their relationship, it's likely that Camithia was not there just to talk. She went to his home to confront him.
At this point, Camithia Coleman has made the shift from innocent victim to suspect number one.
She does have every motive to do Brian harm.
They believe it's time to have another sit-down with Camithia Coleman.
Investigators called Camithia in with no trouble under the guise of following up on Brian's investigation.
Once she arrived, they informed her that she was now a suspect in Brian's murder.
What happened last night?
What I told you.
You do realize that if I prove that you're lying to me, that you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life. You do not come out of prison on a murder charge in Louisiana. So I'm giving you the opportunity now to set the record straight, okay?
But Camithia isn't budging.
She sticks to her original statement, saying John, her stalker, is the main suspect they need to be looking into.
What do you want to find? I mean, I've told you.
All we want to find out the honest truth. How many times you guys have been knocked down, dragged out, getting into it?
Although Camithia continues to insist she didn't kill Brian, she does admit that their relationship had become rocky in recent months.
I need some space.
We're dating, but I mean, we've been off and on for I don't know how long.
She also admits that she ran into Brian at the club that night, but says it wasn't planned.
We learned that Brian and Camithia had made a pact, if they were going to go out separately, not to go to the same establishment.
They both agreed that spending quality time away from each other was important for a successful relationship.
We just never go to the same club together. It was just our thing.
But Camithia claims on the night of January 16th, she accidentally showed up at the same club Brian and his friends were already at.
When she saw him, she approached him and calmly asked him not to be mad at her.
I was calm. I just wanted to talk to him.
But it was no use. She said that Brian was livid.
You keep doing this. I need you to...
He was like, why were you there? And he was pissed. He was mad at me.
She advised that she had gone to the apartment to talk to Brian to try and calm things over because of what happened at the club, trying to work things out with him. But Brian was not having it.
I told you, you don't listen.
Camithia says he began squeezing her hand very hard and it hurt.
Go. He just because it's coming. I told you. I told you not to go to the club.
She claimed that Brian grabbed her throat with one hand and started choking her.
Camethea says she was eventually able to free herself.
You jerked away.
She says she was trying to get out of his apartment immediately.
Was like pushed you. And you can knife out.
He pulled a knife out.
Camethea told investigators he had stabbed her several times before she could get away from him.
And I pushed him. And I was like, if I don't do something, he'll kill me.
So when she freed herself, she dashed to the kitchen to arm herself.
She then confessed to stabbing him, however, stated it was self-defense because Brian had attacked her previously and she was afraid for him to attack her again.
I used to do my too.
So you just kept stabbing. When did his throat get cut? Because it was cut bad.
Once again, she blames that on this mysterious John character.
Oh, yeah. So he showed up in the middle of y'all fighting?
Somebody's upset you. What can you do?
Camethea stated that in an attempt to protect her, John took the knife away from Brian and began stabbing him harder and deeper.
Camethea says she begged him to stop, but John was insistent on killing Brian.
I didn't want to go that far. I was just trying to protect myself. I did not want to go that far.
But detectives know that Camethea's story doesn't add up.
All of the evidence collectively was telling that Camethea was the likely murderer, and John the intruder didn't exist.
At this point, Camethea realizes she's in hot water, so she decides to lawyer up.
Can I get an attorney, please?
That's what you want.
Right. Time now is 09:21. Ms. Coleman is requesting an attorney. All tapes will be stopped at this time.
Regardless of Camethea's new story, investigators have enough to arrest her and charge her with Brian's murder.
But will justice ever be served in this case?
Camethea pleaded not guilty due to reason of insanity.
She was definitely putting on a show. I never saw any remorse, any I can't believe I just did this to the person I love, or any kind of apologetic demeanor in her. I don't know what kind of mental state she was in trying to deal with what she had done, but initially, yeah, it was just a range of emotions of what could we have done differently that night, and you know, wondering, you just wonder like what the hell was she thinking, what was going through her mind, what caused her to flip like that.
In January of 2010, Shreveport investigators have Camethea Coleman in custody for the murder of her estranged boyfriend, Brian Spinks.
When I found out that she was under arrest for this, the shock just got even more amplified, because this was somebody that he cared about, that we thought cared about him.
The commanding officer called me, and he said, she's the one that did it. I said, no way. There's no way. He said, yes, no way did she do it. Yes, she did.
Even with Camethea behind bars, investigators are still discovering additional evidence against her.
A forensic medical examiner studies both Brian's autopsy report as well as Camethea's medical records from the night of the murder.
What they determined was that Camethea's 5 stab wounds were self-inflicted.
Investigators can only assume that Camethea stabbed herself to make it look like she acted in self-defense.
And in the months leading up to trial, Camethea continues going to extreme lengths to avoid taking responsibility for Brian's death.
Camethea pleaded not guilty due to reason of insanity. She stated that she'd blacked out and was completely unaware of what she had done to Brian.
And in July of 2011, she was found to be mentally incompetent to stand trial.
It takes more than a year from Brian's murder for Camethea to undergo enough psychiatric treatment to be deemed fit for trial.
She went to 3 different doctors for competency. And one of the doctors said that she was malingering, that they kind of knew that, that she was acting as if something was wrong with her when there was nothing wrong with her. She was definitely competent and was putting on a show, basically.
On April 23, 2012, Camethea Coleman finally stands before judge and jury.
Camethea stands by her plea of not guilty due to self-defense. She claims she was in a very abusive relationship with Brian, and that night was only the last in a long history of violent nights.
Brian was the opposite of violent. When her defense started saying that, we knew it was way far from the truth that any of that would have ever taken place.
We were all in pain, watching them trying to make my son into a woman abuser with no evidence. She never told anybody she ever got hit, no scratches, no bruises, no reports, no nothing.
When it's their turn, prosecutors describe what they believe actually happened the night Brian was killed.
They believe that Camethea went to confront him about the incident at the club.
Please,
no,
I just
Kim,
want to.
no, Kim, I am
listen,
done.
I just want to talk to you.
Talk about what? Kim,
No.
it's over.
Brian said that things are over, and that's when she decided that if she couldn't have him, no one would.
Prosecutors believe that once Brian's back was turned, Camethea grabbed a knife from the butcher's block and stabbed him in the back.
Sick and tired of this.
They argued that then Brian stumbled into the living room where Camethea continued her vicious attack, stabbing him so many times that the knife broke.
Camethea could have stopped there.
But she went back and retrieved another knife after the first steak knife was broken. And she continued to stab him and stab him and stab him.
And then when she felt like Brian wouldn't survive, she called 911 to appear like a concerned girlfriend.
Mommy, somebody's trying to kill my boyfriend.
However, Camethea didn't expect Brian to start speaking when she was on the phone with 911.
Concerned that he might say something that gave her away, prosecutors believe that then, with one final push, Camethea inflicted the fatal wound to Brian's throat to keep him quiet.
During the trial, the coroner pointed out that Brian could not have verbalized those words with the damage that was done to the front part of his throat, which means that damage was done to his throat after she made the phone call.
Prosecutors believe that in order to sell her self-defense claim, Camethea turned the knife on herself and made up the bogus story about John the stalker to lead police off her trail.
They believe her story about John was completely fabricated and he did not exist.
A lot of people ask me, like, he was in the military, why didn't he fight her off? He's not a fighter. He's not an aggressive person. Some of the defense marks that we found out that were on him, he was clearly just, balled up, trying to survive, trying to live.
When the jury retires to deliberate, they side with prosecutors.
They unanimously found Camethea guilty of second-degree murder.
Camethea Coleman is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
She got what she deserved. She does not need to be on the streets anywhere for the crime that she committed.
When you hear the words, there is joy, but not joy in a happy way. More a joy and a relief that none of the lies that she said the jury believed. Relief that justice has been, served. And that his family could, start the grieving process, start moving on.
Nobody won anything that night. 2 families lost their children forever. Yeah, she's getting jailed the rest of her life, but what did anybody win? It didn't bring Brian back.
The world lost a good person a person that really cared about the people that were in his life.
Brian was crazy about that young lady. And that's the part that hurts. He was murdered by somebody he loved.
He was a former foster kid with a bright future.
He had aspirations of going to college and furthering his education.
His first goal was to be in the medical field.
She was a street-smart beauty from the wrong side of the tracks.
Kel just fell in love with her. She was the one.
Their love connection was instant. But is one of them hiding a terrible secret?
That anger, that jealousy.
There was a lot of violence in the past.
Two worlds collide on a Jacksonville street corner. One man is left dead.
My heart almost stopped.
One woman goes missing.
She completely vanishes.
And police are left with a slew of unanswered questions.
That doesn't make sense in itself. Who's going to walk towards the gunfire?
We began to question whether she was a witness or whether she was truly involved in the murder.
January 15th, 2011. It's a quiet afternoon in Jacksonville, Florida, until a hail of gunfire suddenly rings out.
Back up, please. Miss, did you call me? Miss, are you okay?
When police arrive on the scene, they find a distraught woman hovering over the victim.
Come with me. Have a seat right here, Miss. The detective will be with you in just a moment.
We separated her from the crowd that was gathering to be held so detectives could talk to her privately.
When we arrived, there's an individual laying in the road who had sustained a gunshot wound.
Looks like a single gunshot wound to the back.
The victim was identified as 21-year-old Travis Green.
On the surface, Travis appears to be another young victim of a violent street crime. But as detectives true love gone horribly awry. Growing up in the foster care system of Jacksonville, Florida, Travis Green had a rough childhood. That is, until his foster parents, Ernestine and Alonzo Green, came into his life.
They couldn't find a permanent home for him, so me and my husband fell in love with Travis, and we decided to adopt him.
Raised in the comfortable middle-class neighborhood of Sherwood Forest, Travis began to thrive.
You know, he was like a little funny person. I always loved to clown and laugh and joke and stuff like that.
Travis, he keep you laughing. He was a real fun guy.
But there was more to Travis than just his sense of humor.
He wanted to be something, you know. His first goal was to be in the medical field, and he really wanted somebody like.
With the winning smile and the confidence of someone who knew he was going places, Travis had plenty of girls to choose from.
I used to always tease and say, you know, all the female friends say, oh, that's your girlfriend? Oh, Mama, she's just a friend.
He had lots of girls interested in him, but his best friend was his classmate, Letitia Abrams.
And it was Letitia who introduced Travis to the first girl he really fell head over heels for, Crystal Nelson.
How you doing? My name's Travis.
Nice to meet you too.
You said Crystal, right?
Things started slowly at first.
Want to sit down?
Yeah, actually.
Travis was certainly more interested in Crystal than she was in him, but apparently she was aware of that mutual attraction, and so they flirted a bit.
So, you from around here? So I was thinking, you know, maybe we can go for a walk one day.
Crystal Nelson came from the north side of Jacksonville, but it may as well have been a world away.
It's a residential area with its fair share of problems.
A lot of empty lots, not too many homes there. It is not a nice place even in the daytime to go to.
At the time she and Travis met, Crystal had a 3-month-old baby, but was no longer seeing the baby's father.
They had stopped dating 2 months prior.
Before long, Travis and Crystal were seeing a lot of each other, often facilitated by their mutual friend, Letitia.
You guys.
Letitia, what you doing?
One more time. They would meet up at Letitia's house. They would either hang out there or take walks around the neighborhood.
There's, getting to know each other. They were visiting.
And it developed into more of a relationship between the two.
But on the afternoon of January 15th, Travis and Crystal's budding romance is cut short in a hail of gunfire. As police cordon off the area and begin their initial investigation, their first order of business is to talk to the woman standing at the scene of the crime, Travis and Crystal's friend, Letitia.
There was a female at the scene that had some information regarding what happened. So patrol officers took her and put her in a police car just to keep her safe and to keep her from talking to other people.
At least for a few minutes, until Detective Karen Dukes from the Major Crimes Unit arrives on the scene.
What's the situation?
Hey, we got a 911 call. On our arrival, we found out one black male with a gunshot wound to his back. Had a crowd of folks around the body. We pushed them back and secured the scene.
Responding officers point the detective in the direction of Letitia Abrams.
We've got a witness that's up in a patrol car. Well, we think it's his best friend, if you want to speak with her.
Thank you. I'm Detective Dukes, and you are? Letitia Abrams. Mind if I ask you a few questions?
Detective Dukes did a initial contact interview in the front seat of her car.
How'd you know the victim?
Well, Travis was my best friend.
When's the last time you saw him?
About 20 minutes ago.
Letitia explains to Detective Dukes that Travis and Crystal were hanging out at Letitia's house, but had plans to attend a barbecue at the home of a mutual friend, Tony Gross, later that evening.
Travis asked Crystal if she could walk with him to the convenience store.
Initially, there was a desire of Travis to go with Crystal to a convenience store. And first, she didn't want to go. She just didn't feel like walking. But then she did.
According to Letitia, Travis and Crystal then headed north down Westlake Avenue.
Westlake Avenue is a dead end 2 block street.
Letitia tells Detective Dukes that's the last time she saw Travis or Crystal.
Letitia told the officer that the victim had actually been with her friend named Crystal, and Crystal was not at the scene.
A fact which presents Detective Dukes with 2 different but equally important questions. Who killed Travis Green? And where is his girlfriend, Crystal Nelson?
She completely vanished.
In the winter of 2011, 21-year-old Travis Green thought he had finally found his true love.
He really liked Crystal. He thought there was something special between the two of them.
But now he lies dead on Westlake Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida, cut down by a single gunshot in the back. The only individual at the scene who was able to provide detectives with information about the shooting is Travis's best friend, Letitia Abrams.
Letitia waited at home while Crystal and Travis went to the store. Letitia's from that area, and she knows how long it takes to walk to the store and come back.
It took longer than expected, so that's when I knew something was wrong.
She's worried she hasn't seen the two of them. And then she heard the gunshot. She ran outside and saw Travis Green's body lying in the street.
Letitia came outside and she saw the body of Travis laying in the street. She called 911 to try to get him some help.
Where's Crystal now? I don't know. Well, do you mind taking a ride with my officers to go look for Crystal? Okay.
Crystal was not at the scene, so Letitia agreed to go look for her.
Their initial fear was that Crystal was abducted.
The biggest focus at the time, within the first 30 minutes, was on Crystal.
Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, the medical examiner confirms the cause of death.
It appears a single gunshot wound to the back.
They check his shirt, they check his back, and they identify a gunshot wound that's in Travis Green's back. And so at this point, we know that there's a gunshot wound that's fatal.
The initial survey of the scene doesn't uncover any shell casings, so investigators broadened the search.
We didn't know how far the victim had traveled, where maybe the gunshots were fired. Was he right there when the gunshots were fired? Did he make it a certain distance? Because unlike the movies, when you get shot, you don't just necessarily drop right there and then. You can travel a certain distance.
The area that the body was found in the street, there is a large field across the street from it. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office has a K-9 unit that can do what's called an article search. And the K-9s can search an area looking for particular things or new things that are introduced that are related to the crime scene.
While police dogs are searching for shell casings, Letitia is still searching for her friend, Crystal. Finally, they find her, alive.
There she is. Crystal, hey. You okay? What happened?
Ma'am, can you get in the car with us, please?
She agreed to go ahead and come back to the crime scene.
Go hop in the front seat.
So I invited Crystal to sit in the front seat of my detective car, and I interviewed her privately.
So why'd you flee the scene?
I had spent the night at my friend's house, so I was just going back to get my bag, but I was coming right back.
She claimed that she had spent the night at someone's house and wanted to go back and get her overnight bag before she returned back to the crime scene.
What happened?
Detective Dukes presses Crystal for details about the shooting.
Well, me and Travis, we were going to the store to get some rolls for the party.
She told me that she and the victim, who was identified as Travis, had left to go to the store. And she said that when they were leaving, there was a white car that was facing south on 27th.
Can you describe the car further for me?
It was white or off-white, medium size, tinted windows.
She said when they were leaving, they heard 2 gunshots come from that vehicle, where she commented that wasn't an unusual event because of the area that they lived in.
So then what'd you do?
Well, after we got the rolls, we headed back to the house.
Was the white car still there?
Yeah.
She said as they were coming back, they continued to walk almost back up to that white car. And then she said that the shots came from the white car.
One of those shots hit Travis?
Yeah.
She said she heard 3 to 5 gunshots. She said that she took off running and ran to the end of Westlake. It wasn't until she got to the end of the road when she turned around and saw Travis laying in the roadway.
You know, they say a good detective has a built-in lie detector or a BS detector. They can tell when they're being fed a line. And in this case, apparently the detective got the feeling that Crystal wasn't telling the truth, that the story of the white car was not holding up.
Crystal, do you mind if I test your hand?
Test my hand?
Yeah.
I guess.
Crystal's story with us didn't make sense. And considering that she was at the scene of crime where someone died and a gun had been fired, we conducted a gunshot residue test.
Hedging their bets on the off chance that Crystal is telling the truth about the shooting, Detective Dukes requests that a bolo, be on the lookout, be issued on the white vehicle Crystal has described.
Tinted windows.
We give it to the patrol officers that work in the area, and that way they can be looking for anything that might match that description.
Okay, thanks.
This is an area where gunfires are very common, and the presence of drugs and gang activities are common also.
As Crystal's gun residue test is sent to the crime lab for analysis, police can't help but wonder, was the murder of Travis Green a drive-by shooting, or something else entirely?
A lot of it didn't make sense.
January 15th, 2011, Jacksonville, Florida. Police have responded to the scene of the cold-blooded murder of 21-year-old Travis Green, gunned down in broad daylight by someone in a white car, according to his new girlfriend, Crystal Nelson.
We put a bolo out for a white car with dark tinted windows, just so patrol could be looking for that and be aware.
But something about Crystal's story doesn't sit right with investigators.
She's saying that shots were coming from a white car, but yet then she tells Detective Dukes that she's walking towards this white car. Well, and that doesn't make sense in itself. Who's going to walk towards the gunfire? You're going to run from it, or you're going to make a phone call to 911.
There's also the fact that after the shooting, Crystal disappeared from the scene entirely.
If you're an innocent victim or witness, why would you leave the scene in the first place?
She said that she had spent the night with her friend the night before. She told us that she was walking because she was going to get her overnight bag, and that's why she left the crime scene.
As patrol officers canvass the neighborhood in search of additional eyewitnesses, the suspicions surrounding Crystal's story only increase.
When the police officers were doing a canvass of the area, they noticed a group of black males that were standing on the corner. So the officers approached them to see if they had any information or had seen anything.
Guys, looking for some information on a guy by the name of Travis Green. Y'all know him?
Well, I don't know him like that.
They said that they had noticed Travis in the area. They knew that he was new to the area. They did not know him. They also knew Crystal and said that she knew more than what she was letting on.
Okay, guys, I appreciate you. Thank you.
After speaking with the young men, investigators bring Crystal down to the station to make an official statement.
Crystal came to the homicide office, and my partner and I began to interview her more in depth about what happened at the scene.
Why don't you take us through the events leading up to the shooting?
Well, the night before, me and Letitia had spent the night at Tony's house.
Crystal begins to tell us of what occurred the night before the murder. She told us that she and Letitia had spent the night at Tony's house.
Tony was a friend of Crystal and Letitia. And that's where you were going to retrieve your luggage? And then Letitia and Officer Jensen found you?
Yes, ma'am.
We questioned her about why, in the middle of a murder investigation, she needed to go get her overnight bag. And she never could really give us a very good answer as to why she did that.
Crystal, a lot of the stuff you're telling us just doesn't even make sense. You can't give us a good description of the car. You don't have a good reason why you left the crime scene. I just don't see why she would believe any of it.
I know it sounds crazy, but I'm not lying.
We continued to press her with some of the contradictions in her statement, and she even agreed that she didn't sound believable.
But believable or not, Crystal sticks to her story. Detective Dukes has no choice but to turn Crystal loose. With the results of the gun residue test still pending, they have nothing to hold her on.
At the conclusion of the interview, she needed a ride, and so I offered to take her back to her mother's house. And she said no, she wanted to go back to Letitia's house.
After dropping Crystal off at Letitia's house, Detective Dukes heads back to the station.
She comes to me and says, Sarge, I need to let you know that Crystal's not being truthful. She's hiding something.
Detective Dukes?
I received a phone call that afternoon from Letitia. And Letitia was asking me if I knew where Crystal was, which I was a little surprised, and I told her that I had just dropped Crystal off at her house. So it was a little confusing why she was asking me where Crystal was.
She's not with you?
It appears that when we dropped Crystal off, she never went inside.
Letitia, can you meet with me so I can ask you a few questions?
Later that evening, Detective Duke sits down with Letitia at a local restaurant.
So what can you tell me about your friend Crystal?
Well, Crystal and Travis.
She shared with me that Crystal and Travis had met and had become friends, and then it developed into more of a relationship between the two.
Tell me what Crystal and Travis were up to today.
Well, Crystal and I...
The day of the murder started out supposedly nice. There was a barbecue planned at Tony's house later in the evening, and all of them went shopping that day, and then Letitia and Crystal peeled off to go down to Letitia's house.
According to Letitia, when she and Crystal arrived at her house, they began getting ready for the barbecue. Shortly after that, Travis arrived.
Crystal had asked Travis to meet her at Letitia's house, so later on, he actually showed up.
And so at some point they left.
Yeah, they both left and went to go get rolls from the grocery store.
And that's when Letitia expressed her concern and distrust of Crystal to me. And I asked her why, and she said that she was very concerned about the lack of emotion and indicated that Crystal's reaction was inappropriate.
Crystal didn't seem to have a lot of emotion about what had happened to her newfound friend, that he'd been shot and killed. And that indeed was a big concern.
Detective Dukes presses Letitia on why she thinks Crystal may be lying about what happened to Travis.
You said Travis was your best friend, right?
Yes.
So how do you feel about Crystal dating your best friend?
I mean, I don't mind and have no problem. Travis and I aren't like that, so.
You sure? Maybe Letitia was jealous of Crystal. Maybe she wanted something more with Travis.
Young people's nowadays, it's not like when I was growing up. They got more rage and jealousy, you know, with these females.
If you want to talk about someone who's jealous, you should really look at Isaiah.
Who's Isaiah?
Crystal's baby daddy.
Crystal and Isaiah Boston had been dating for a while, and apparently they ended their relationship in November of 2010, which was a few months before the actual murder. And indeed, he was the father of her child.
According to Letitia, Isaiah was looking for Crystal the day of the murder.
Letitia knew that Crystal had a jealous ex-boyfriend named Isaiah. So she was very concerned when Travis came over to visit while Crystal was there. At one point early in the afternoon, when Crystal and Travis walked to the store, Letitia knew that it was a dangerous situation. Isaiah had been calling and checking and trying to make contact with Crystal.
But how would Isaiah Boston know that Travis had come to visit Crystal at Letitia's house? Or that they had walked to the store? Is it possible that Letitia, jealous of Crystal and Travis's budding romance, tipped Isaiah off to their whereabouts?
Is she involved in this? Did she set Travis up? You know, what kind of involvement is she a principal in the first degree to a murder?
Do you know where Isaiah is now?
No, I don't have any idea.
Have you talked to him since the murder? No. All right, I appreciate your time. I'll be in touch.
As the sun sets on the first day of the investigation, authorities are growing frustrated that no one who's connected with this case seems to be telling the truth. And so far, there's been no sign of the white car Crystal claims the deadly shots came from.
Detective Dukes?
That's when Detective Dukes receives a call from the crime lab. They have the results of Crystal's gunshot residue test.
That was the GSR test. Crystal's test came back negative.
I guess she wasn't the one that pulled the trigger, huh?
The results of the test were negative. Crystal had not fired the gun that killed Travis.
The negative results of the GSR test may have ruled out Crystal as the shooter, but detectives still believe she holds the key to finding Travis's killer. The problem is that once again, they can't find her.
She had disappeared. She was gone.
It's been 24 hours since Travis Green was shot dead on the streets of Northwest Jacksonville. Now the crime's primary eyewitness, his girlfriend Crystal Nelson, is missing. Last seen when Detective Karen Dukes dropped Crystal off at the home of Travis's best friend, Letitia Abrams, the previous evening.
Crystal never shows up. She never comes in. She completely vanishes.
We began to be concerned about her safety. And so I had to make contact with Crystal's family. Crystal's family didn't know where she was.
Her mother goes out looking for her frantically.
Why would you disappear and not go to the home where police dropped you off and worry your parents?
The next morning after the murder, my partner and I responded to the medical examiner's office for the autopsy.
The victim suffered a single gunshot wound to his upper right portion of his back, possibly from a 9mm or a .380.
The doctor said by looking at the wound that he believed the victim may have even lived another 30 seconds after being shot, which ended up being important because we learned that the victim was shot and then was still able to run around the corner and down the street a little bit before he finally collapsed.
Armed with that new information, investigators head back to Westlake Avenue.
After the autopsy, my partner and I went back out to the scene. We still were looking for shell casings from the shooting. We had a metal detector and we scoured the area.
Hey, come here and look at this.
The cases that we found were 380 cases.
Detective Dukes.
While my partner and I were investigating at the scene, we were notified that the police had contacted and located Crystal. So I spoke to the police officer on the phone, and I asked him to ask her to come back to the homicide office for another interview, to which she agreed.
All right, thanks.
The first question on the minds of investigators is, where has Crystal been?
Where did you spend the night last night?
At Tony's house. What's Tony's last name? I don't know. What street does he live on? I don't know. I don't know what street he lives on. And like I said, I don't be over here. You spent the night at his house. I know. You don't even know the street number? No. You don't know. You spent the night at a man's house, you don't even know his last name?
Uncertain what to make of Crystal's evasiveness, investigators try a different line of questioning.
Tell me about Isaiah. My baby daddy. My baby daddy. What you want to know? Have you ever known him to carry a gun? No.
When's the last time you saw Isaiah?
Last time I saw Isaiah was day before yesterday. Do you know who he's staying with over there? No. Would he be staying with Tony? Not that I knew of. What kind of car does Tony drive? Tony don't drive. He don't drive a car. I have a car. Do any of their family members have a white car? No. I know nobody not there since got no car for that much. Do you think Isaiah did it? Isaiah, first of all, he ain't got no car. He ain't got no friends with no car. Second of all, I don't know how he gonna get his hands on the gun unless somebody give it to him or he's stealing anything like that.
Crystal's story is more confusing than it is helpful, but detectives wonder if the anonymous Tony she mentioned in her interview.
We decided to go to Tony's house to verify her part of that story.
Yes, can I help you?
Tony,
Yes.
you know we're here? Sure. Can we come in?
Sure, come on in. Can I get you guys anything? Need something?
Tony was there. He was very cooperative with us. He knew why we were there, and so we spoke to him for several minutes.
Tony claims to know nothing about the shooting, but just as they are getting ready to head out, Detective Dukes asks him one more question.
Is Isaiah here?
Right as we were about to leave, I just happened to ask him, is Isaiah here? And he was like, well, yeah. So we said, well, ask Isaiah if he wants to come down and talk to us too.
To the officer's surprise, Isaiah readily agrees.
Isaiah ended up coming with Tony, and so he rode in the car and came downtown to the homicide office for a formal interview.
Investigators believe they are inching closer to solving the murder of Travis Green. But what happens next will blow the case wide open.
Tony just casually said, hey, what you been doing? And he said, I just killed somebody.
The investigation into the shooting death of Travis Green is now 48 hours old. Police believe that his new girlfriend, Crystal Nelson, has something to do with the crime. But so far, Crystal hasn't exactly been forthcoming with the truth.
Do any of their family members have a white car? No. I know nobody out there got no car for that much. Do you think Isaiah did it? Isaiah, first of all, he ain't got no car. He ain't got no friends with no car. Second of all, I don't know how he gonna get his hands on the gun unless somebody give it to him or he's stealing anything like that.
She stuck to her story that the shots had come from a white car.
Why is she telling the story about the white car?
Ever since the shooting, patrol officers have been searching for the mysterious white car and have come up empty. Apparently, no one saw it but Crystal.
We didn't believe that there was any white car involved because it just didn't make sense.
But why would Crystal be lying?
Did she do it? Or is she covering for someone who did it?
At the station, police sit down with Tony Gross, the best friend of Isaiah Boston. Isaiah is the father of Crystal's 3-month-old child.
When we arrived at the homicide office with Tony and Isaiah, we wanted to interview Tony first because we wanted as much information as we could get before we interviewed Isaiah. So I am conducting a homicide investigation, and I just need you to be truthful. I'd rather you just not tell me anything than to lie to me, okay? Tony said that Isaiah had been staying with him the last couple of days leading up to the murder.
Tony then tells detectives that the day of the shooting, Isaiah spent the night, but also informs them he had another house guest that evening.
The night before, Crystal had stayed over at the same house with Isaiah Boston.
If that's true, it means Crystal lied to detectives when she said she hadn't been in touch with Isaiah since the shooting occurred. Detectives pressed Tony for more information in hopes of clearly establishing the connection between Crystal and Isaiah the night of Travis Green's murder.
Where was Crystal?
She came over later.
Okay.
Did Crystal confront Isaiah about the shooting? She said something about something. Yeah, gotcha.
Detectives aren't sure what to make of Tony's story, so they continue to pepper him with questions.
Tell us what you know. What did you hear?
What did he tell you?
Just tell us what you But what did he say? He said he went around there and did something. Okay, he can't hear us.
Yeah, he said he did that.
You
He said he killed somebody. He tells Tony, just nonchalantly, yeah, I just killed someone. And Tony, at first, couldn't believe it. He didn't believe that actually happened, because Isaiah was always dramatic and, had a lot of drama in his life.
Police ask Tony if he owns any guns. He admits he does.
You want to start over here? I'll start over here.
Tony actually described the two handguns that he had. He gave them consent to search his house and found two weapons.
Take your phone. We get.
My two partners went to Tony's house and ended up recovering a gun. It was actually a .380.
The gun that was used to kill Travis was also a .380 semi-automatic handgun.
Have investigators found the murder weapon? While police transport the gun to the forensics lab, Detective Dukes and her partner usher Isaiah Boston into the interrogation room and cut right to the chase.
What happened?
Right there, 27th and Westlake.
I'm serious. He claimed to have no involvement whatsoever. Claimed that there wasn't any interaction. There was nothing there.
Is Isaiah Boston telling the truth? If so, then who really killed Travis Green? And why?
Boundaries. And there was no boundary set. And when someone is in a relationship and you're ending that relationship, it is very important to kind of let the person know where you stand, that the relationship is over, and take some time to kind of know what you want in the next relationship and not carrying on that baggage back into the new relationship.
Police in Jacksonville, Florida have found what they believe to be the weapon used to murder 21-year-old Travis Green. Not only that, Tony Gross has just claimed that his friend Isaiah Boston admitted to him that he killed Travis.
Police believe Isaiah killed Travis out of jealousy when he found out his former girlfriend is dating.
After our interview with Tony, my partner and I, Detective Gupton, went in to speak with Isaiah. We presented him with his constitutional rights, and he agreed voluntarily to speak with us.
At first, Isaiah denies having anything to do with the murder.
What happened?
Right there, 27th and Westlake.
I'm serious.
Investigators counter Isaiah's denials by leveraging the information gleaned from their interview with Tony Gross.
Say Tony, your godbrother?
What's
a godbrother mean?
Me, basically, if I know you to a certain extent where you met my people, then I can sit there and talk to you really about anything.
That's fact. You can't talk to your godbrother about anything. I think you did talk to your godbrother about anything.
What you mean?
You talked to your godbrother about Crystal?
Yeah, I told
about who was with Crystal?
Yeah.
And what happened? Saturday around 1 o'clock.
Around 1 o'clock?
Yeah. We've been in there for the last hour talking to Tony. Tony told us everything.
Investigators then pace Isaiah through the events they believe led to the murder of Travis Green. They assert that at approximately 1 p.m. on January 15th, Isaiah confronted Crystal and Travis on their way back from the store.
Maybe tonight we can go out to dinner.
Crystal, why you been answering your phone?
What are you doing here?
What am I? Answer your phone.
I don't pick up my phone.
Crystal, who is this? Who am I? Hey, this between me and my girl. Your girl? Who is this?
I'm not
He
just.
said that he did find the two of them together and that he confronted him.
Hey, don't touch me out. Hey, excuse me, this between me and her. Nobody. This between me and her. Don't put your hands on me, man. Hey, this between me and her.
And he said that he and Travis got into a fist fight.
Yeah, and he went to swinging at me all crazy. Like something was wrong with him.
Guys, stop! Stop!
As far as the rest of that, they're good. I really wanted to hit him. I really did. We fought a little bit. As far as that shooting go, it ain't nothing.
Well, what happened with the shooting?
I don't know. Now that I ain't have nothing to do with it. They say I don't. We fought right there, but I swear I ain't have nothing to do with it.
We confronted him on his story and asked him if he had any injuries or anything to, back up the fact that he got into a fight. He didn't have any defensive wounds or any other indications that he had been in any kind of altercation.
Let me ask you a question. That 380 that's in Tony's room that's now in our custody, there can be your fingerprints on there, is there? There can be your DNA on there, and nothing like that.
Though the analysis of the alleged murder weapon isn't complete, detectives believe they have found Travis's killer. They continue to press Isaiah, and ultimately it pays off.
Towards the end of the interview, Isaiah agreed to just tell us the truth.
In a written statement, Isaiah spells out exactly how the shooting went down.
Okay, back up.
He told us that he was angry, and he told Travis to get on the ground. And then at some point, Travis was able to get up, but while he was running away, Isaiah recalled firing 3 shots.
On January 17th, Isaiah Boston is charged with the murder of Travis Green.
The detective called me and told me that they had made an arrest. And I was so happy because I thought his death was going to be another tragedy, that it wasn't going to be no arrest behind it.
March 15th, 2012, a little over a year since Travis Green's murder. The trial of Isaiah Boston begins in Duval County Circuit Court in Jacksonville, Florida. The charge is first-degree murder.
In Florida, when charged with first-degree murder, the state must prove really 2 elements: that there was a killing and that the defendant acted with premeditation when he committed the criminal act.
Prosecutors kick off their case by calling their star witness, Crystal Nelson.
The best evidence in this case came from, first and foremost, the testimony of Crystal. Although Crystal was not truthful in her original account to police.
Originally, Crystal had told investigators that Travis had been shot by an unidentified man in a white vehicle. But under oath on the witness stand, Crystal confesses that it was Isaiah who shot Travis.
They were returning from the convenience store back towards Letitia's house.
She tried to warn Travis, "Oh no, there's my ex-boyfriend." And Isaiah ran up to them and immediately pulled a gun out on them.
He proceeded to tell Travis to get down on the ground. Travis refuses, and that's when he decided to run.
The victim reacted out of fear and ran, at which point in time he fired his gun 3 times at the victim, striking him in the back as he was running away.
Lucky I don't shoot you too. God, I love you too much. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Crystal.
He then asked Crystal to run with him, and Crystal refused. Then he ran away.
After pacing the court through what really happened, Crystal explains why she had not initially identified her child's father as Travis Green's true killer.
Crystal indicated that she made up the story about the white car, and she said that there were 2 reasons why she was afraid of Isaiah, and then the other one was to protect Isaiah.
Ultimately, everything she said comported with the rest of the evidence. Everything mounted in one direction towards Isaiah Boston as being his true killer.
Faced with overwhelming testimonial and physical evidence, the defense argues that the shooting doesn't rise to the level of first-degree murder.
That was the focus of the defense in this case. That yes, he acted, yes, he pulled the trigger, but it wasn't with the premeditated intent to kill.
On the 16th of March, the case is turned over to the jury. It takes them just 4 hours to reach a verdict.
The jury found him first-degree murder guilty. And when I heard that, I just gave a big relief.
Isaiah Boston is sentenced to life in prison.
This was just a love triangle gone wrong. Ultimately, Isaiah Boston was overcome by jealousy. He couldn't stand seeing the love of his life walking down the street with another man. He confronted them, and when the victim turned to run for his life, he shot him in cold blood and killed him.
It don't bring Travis back. It don't bring him back. But it was a relief to find out that somebody gonna pay for what they did by taking his life.
When a young woman unwraps newfound love, it leaves a taste in her mouth that she won't soon forget.
At first it was kind of a friendship thing, and then it just kind of began to morph into something else.
These two people really cared for one another, and they were making plans for the future.
But under a dark harvest moon, with forces building beyond their control.
Rumors started circulating that someone had been stalking her.
They are saying that there's a love triangle going on. They have seen numerous men with their identities being concealed moving towards them.
We got shots fired. We're pursuing white Nissan.
But is this the tragic end to a star-crossed romance, or the first hint of terror on the Day of the Dead?
She wasn't gonna back down. If somebody was threatening her or her friends or her family.
That was a recipe for disaster.
It's just very scary. Yeah, there's people dying like everywhere.
That day, everything stopped.
October 31st, 2013. It's Halloween night, and police are heavily patrolling the streets in Portland, Oregon.
Whenever you have a holiday, people tend to be a little bit more wild and rambunctious.
They were definitely having extra officers on the streets, just making sure that the public was safe.
For patrol officers in southeast Portland, it's been a relatively quiet night. But at 1:25 a.m., that all changes in an instant.
Did you hear that?
I think it was that way.
Let's go.
They immediately got in their car and started heading in the direction where they heard the gunshots.
David 21. Shots fired, Briarwood 21st.
As the two officers race down a boulevard, they spot a white Nissan Altima whip out of the Laurel Place apartment complex.
You see that?
The officers decide to follow the vehicle because it had its headlights off. That could have posed danger to the public.
As police turn on their sirens, the Nissan accelerates. Cops follow in hot pursuit.
21 dispatch, we got a white Nissan, no headlights on, driving erratic.
The driver of that vehicle was turning very fast, very constant, trying to ditch the officers.
As the chase continues, the two officers see their suspects toss something out the window of their speeding vehicle.
The officers couldn't stop to collect that because they needed to continue chasing these suspects. But obviously, they know that that person wants that item, hopefully not be found by police.
21 dispatch, we're behind that white Nissan. He just threw something out the window.
As the suspect's vehicle whips onto 126th Street, its driver loses control.
The car actually got airborne. Ultimately, they went through that barrier in a park. Once that suspect vehicle crashed, the suspects fled.
Please stop!
The two officers race into the park on foot, but by then it's too late. Their suspects are gone.
These suspects definitely had the advantage because it was dark out. They were already wearing dark clothing, and they were simply going to scatter.
I lost him.
But who were these men that disappeared into the darkness? And what horrors had they wrought on this ghoulish night? Soon a sickening discovery is about to raise the stakes in this investigation. And its epicenter is a young Portland woman who had everything to live for.
I've thought about this over and over again, and it's wrong, it's disgusting, and there's no making sense of it.
Precious Jackson grew up in Portland, Oregon in a warm and loving household where family always came first.
Yo, how long is it gonna take? Because we hungry. Yeah, girl, I'm starving. Precious was very, very close with her family, and she spent a lot of time at home.
From an early age, it was clear she was different.
There was absolutely nothing feminine about Precious. She preferred to dress more like a male. She had a very deep voice.
Don't make that too salty. You always make it too salty.
Come on, Priya. If you didn't know better, she could easily have passed for a man.
Though Precious's family embraced her just as she was, not everyone was so accepting.
I know she would get bullied a lot, so she had to create kind of this hard exterior shell. And it came across sometimes as her being like a very hard person, but really she was very soft.
With her warm heart and tough persona, Precious became a fierce protector of those she loved most.
If she saw somebody bullying you or picking on you, she would be the first one to stand up for you.
But when it came to charting her own future, Precious wasn't as self-assured.
Precious did not finish high school. She ended up dropping out. She worked off and on some part-time jobs. She spent a lot of time just hanging out in the streets with her friends. She was a little bit lost.
Of course, this 18-year-old had no way of knowing that a pretty 16-year-old high school student named Mercedes Warren would soon help her find her way.
Hey, nice to meet you, Mercedes. How you doing?
I'm good.
Have a seat right there.
Thank you.
Precious used to cut hair, so my best friend took me over to her house one day to get a haircut.
What you want to get done today?
I kind of want to go short.
Are you crazy? I think you're gorgeous just the way you are.
The first time I met Precious, her smile stood out the most. I had never been interested in a woman before, and I was like immediately attracted to her and her personality.
You know you're beautiful, right? You don't even need all this.
You're crazy.
The two young women soon found themselves spending every free moment together.
Precious and Mercedes started out as just being good friends, and then that friendship grew. They started dating, and I was a little surprised, but immediately I could tell that she really cared about my daughter. When they looked at each other, it was complete eye contact. You could just tell that they were completely in love.
As Precious and Mercedes matured into adulthood, they helped each other become better people.
She just brought out a strength in me that I didn't know that I had, really.
Mercedes did the same thing for Precious. She was encouraging her to live to her full potential.
I've been thinking about something.
Okay.
I was thinking about me going into nursing. It's something I've always wanted to do, you know, with me helping people and stuff like that.
I think that's great.
Though Mercedes and Precious never stopped loving each other, after 4 years together, they made the difficult decision to separate.
We wanted to be together, but we know that we shouldn't. Personality-wise, they really were not a good couple. Mercedes and Precious both had very, very alpha personalities, and they both wanted to have things their way. We decided it was better to be friends.
But in the years that followed, the two women remained close. In fact, Mercedes and her family had the chance to see Precious truly blossom and thrive.
So how's the new job coming?
Oh my God, this new job is so good. Oh, it's so good. I'm so excited. She had decided she wanted to be a nurse's aide. Her passion was working with the elderly. She just felt like things were getting better and looking up. Her smile was still beautiful, and her aura said she was happy. I feel like I got my niche going.
I'm so excited for you.
Thanks. Thank you.
But under an ominous Halloween moon in 2013, a ghastly chain of events were about to unfold, obliterating this young woman's dreams in one brutal moment. years, Precious Jackson had experienced everything life had to offer. From the taste of love to a painful breakup. And finally finding happiness again in a healthcare career that brought her immense joy.
I think that she just really kind of felt empowered by helping people.
But in the early morning hours of November 1st, 2013, a series of unsettling events were underway that would soon cast a pall over Precious's happy life.
Two officers had heard gunshots in a southeast Portland neighborhood, and they ended up pursuing a car they saw speeding away from the Laurel Place apartments.
The suspects ended up crashing their car, and then they disappeared on foot in Portland's Gilbert Heights Park.
But as the two officers combed the vehicle's wreckage, a flood of concerned calls from residents at the Laurel Place apartment complex hits 911 operators.
Somebody just shot in front of my door. They're right in front of my door. I believe they just shot and fell down the stairs and hit my door. Calm down. We got somebody coming your way right now, okay?
As first responders race to the victim's aid, Portland police know they have to act quickly in the interest of public safety.
You can't have homicide suspects running through a neighborhood on a Halloween night. The police knew that they needed to set up a very large perimeter as quickly as possible.
As officers arrive at the Laurel Place apartment complex, they find a crowd gathered outside.
It was a chaotic scene. There were a lot of people coming out of their apartment because they had heard the gunshot.
People are crying, and there's pandemonium.
The first responding officers couldn't really see what was on the ground, but could tell they were looking at someone.
Move, back up.
What they see is a victim who's laying in a pool of blood, riddled with bullets.
She's not breathing.
Got a black female victim, multiple gunshot wounds. Can I get an ambulance here, please? One of the officers tries to do CPR on the victim.
But it soon becomes clear that nothing can be done.
The person is dead.
While officers spread out to start questioning potential witnesses, investigators arrive and begin collecting evidence.
They were able to find 9 shell casings on the ground.
Looks like a casing from a 9mm.
They all appeared to be the same caliber, but at this point, investigators didn't know if it came from the same weapon or several weapons.
Well, having leads to anything?
And uncovering the motive behind this murder could prove challenging in one of Portland's toughest areas.
It happened in a southeast Portland neighborhood that historically has had a lot of crime. Was this a robbery gone bad? Was this a drug deal gone wrong?
We have a lot of domestic violence situations. We do have gang shootings that occur.
Gang activity has been known to thwart criminal investigations, and this case turns out to be no exception.
The people at the apartment complex didn't want to talk to the officers out of fear that this was a gang-related shooting.
They live in fear of what this gang might do in the very near future or far future.
The fear of further violence isn't the only thing impeding this investigation. Up until now, police have been unable to identify their victim. But the cry of a woman in the crowd soon provides a sad clue.
Is that the name of the victim?
She identified the shooting victim as 24-year-old Precious Jackson. Do you mind answering some questions for us?
She was very emotional, and she didn't want to cooperate with law enforcement.
But after some coaxing, investigators are able to pull a partial story out of the hysterical woman who identifies herself as Tasha Williams.
She admitted that she was a friend of Precious and that she saw her get shot. She said it happened after they left the apartment complex laundry room.
Men in these masked and dark clothing showed up.
And these individuals were no late-night trick-or-treaters.
There were several men engaged in this group. Tasha was able to give some details to police about the shooter.
He was a black male. He was about 5'7" to 5'8", anywhere in his late teens to early 20s, and he was wearing a black ski mask.
Is there any reason to why Miss Jackson may have been the victim?
We know you're upset. We'll give you a minute.
As police wait for Tasha to calm down, they move forward with a routine procedure.
Police attempted to confirm Tasha's identity, but there was a problem. The name and the date of birth she gave didn't match anything in the state's database.
which leads investigators to make a troubling conclusion.
This woman is giving a false name.
So why had this young lady deceived Portland police? And what secrets might she be trying to hide?
Ma'am, what is your name again?
The answers to those questions will only take investigators deeper into the abyss.
Your first thought is gonna be, she had something to do with this murder.
While investigating the murder of 24-year-old Precious Jackson, Portland police uncover something disturbing about alleged witness Tasha Williams.
She lied to police and gave them a false name. So, who really is this woman, and what is she trying to hide?
There's no Tasha Williams that matches in the system with any of the information that you gave us, ma'am.
After detectives confront her, the woman purporting to be Tasha Williams finally comes clean.
The woman's real name is not Tasha Williams, it's Sierra Douglas.
Is there anything you want to tell us before we find out?
Precious and I, we were dating.
All right, well, how long were y'all dating?
A month?
She told police that they actually weren't together for very long before they moved in with one another.
We seen that unit up there.
Of course, this all raises red flags for detectives. If your lover was murdered and you were not involved, wouldn't you want to help police?
They needed to make sure that Sierra had no role in Precious's death.
Did you guys have any problems?
No problems.
So then why would you lie to her?
Because I have a warrant.
After checking their database, police confirm that this time Sierra is telling the truth.
But when police tell her they have to take her into custody on an outstanding warrant, she does not take the news well.
We don't have to cuff you up. We can just have you sit in the back seat, okay?
I'm not going back to jail. I'm not going. No. I'm not going.
One of the things that officers actually had to do is they had to physically detain her.
Get off of me!
They ended up wrestling Sierra to put handcuffs on her.
We'll just take her downtown, find out what we can.
Given her combative behavior, police aren't sure what to make of Sierra.
Some of what she said corroborated what the investigation had uncovered so far, but police still felt like she was hiding something and couldn't rule out that she had been somehow involved in this crime.
But for now, Sierra is in no state to talk to anybody.
Questioning would have to wait. Police take her down to the station to book her.
As for the men seen fleeing the apartment complex in the aftermath of the shooting, police find a clue that was tossed from the car in the heat of the chase.
They were able to use a heat-seeking device where they had last reported that object being thrown out and actually locate the object. It was a black ski mask.
Meanwhile, inside Gilbert Park, a search of the suspect's abandoned Nissan Altima turns up something else.
There was an orange bandana, and they also found a cap that also had an insignia of an H, also in orange. The colors, that was very important in this case.
Orange is the color of the Hoover Gang members.
They wear hats with H on them, usually Houston Astro.
The Hoover Gang is a very violent offshoot of the LA Crips. They're very active in Portland. They're known for peddling drugs, arms, prostitution, armed robberies, murders, you name it.
During this time, there was a lot of violent activity coming out of the Hoover Gang, especially against a group called the Rolling 60s.
Did Precious Jackson have some connection to the Rolling 60s? Was she leading a secret life?
Someone could have wanted Precious Jackson dead because of a possible gang affiliation.
As investigators consider that possibility, two witnesses approach officers with potentially important information.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
There was a guy running that way.
They were walking their dog at 130th Street when they saw a man racing from the direction of Gilbert Park.
What did he look like?
He was a black man, young. He had on black pants, black shoes, initially a black jacket.
What do you mean initially?
They described how the man disappeared for a second, and when he re-emerged, the coat was gone, and he was wearing a white button-down shirt.
Not long after a bolo is issued, officers stop a man who matches the witness description to a T.
Hold up, sir.
Is that a problem? It was a cold night. He wasn't wearing a jacket.
If you touch him, he's hot like he's been running a race.
Do you have any ID on you?
What they get is a school ID, and it says this person is Antonio Lorenzo Sanders, 20 years old.
10-4, thank you.
But when officers run Antonio's name, they learn he is no chaste young pupil.
You're gonna need to go with us. We just need to talk to you a little more.
What? He's been involved in shootings that sent him to prison earlier on. He has a warrant for his arrest for being an unlawful possession of a firearm.
And that isn't all.
Mr. Sanders has a gang affiliation. According to Portland police, he was identified as one of the Hooper gang members.
Eager to question Antonio, police detain him on the outstanding warrant. That's when chatter from dispatch alerts police to something highly concerning.
There have been 2 other shootings in the area that night.
One of the first questions we asked, are these 2 shootings related to the shooting that killed Precious Jackson?
All of this raises another terrifying possibility for detectives in these gang-riddled streets.
Is this an all-out gang war?
In the aftermath of Precious Jackson's post-Halloween night murder, investigators discovered another stomach-churning detail. There were 2 other shootings that night in southeast Portland's gang-infested streets.
Is this a related shooting? Is this an all-out war?
Detectives confer with their colleagues at the other crime scenes to see if there might be a link.
Meanwhile, police interrogate one potential suspect, Hoover Criminals gang member Antonio Sanders.
Do you know anybody by the name of Precious Jackson?
No, ma'am.
So you wouldn't happen to know anything about her murder tonight?
They also asked him if he knew anything about the 2 other shootings in Portland that night.
Look, man, I don't know anything about this shooting or any other. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It's dangerous out there.
So what were you doing out in the street that late at night?
Look, man, I was just coming from my girlfriend's house. Just going to the store, and then the police stopped me.
He relates that he took a municipal bus, the number 9, over about 9 p.m. at night. He says he's visiting someone in the area by the name of Antoinette.
Now, Antonio says that at about 1:30 a.m., he left Antoinette's house to make a run to the store, and that is when police stopped him.
You better not be lying. I ain't.
While police attempt to confirm Antonio's story, detectives return to the crime scene, where news of Precious's death has now reached her family and friends.
When they heard the news, they were crying. They were absolutely devastated.
Among the grieving mourners that night is Precious's ex-girlfriend, Mercedes Warren.
With Precious dying, I feel like I lost a piece of me with her.
Though highly emotional, Precious's friends and family are eager to do whatever it takes to help investigators, and detectives have a pressing question to settle.
Given police fears this crime might be connected to a larger gang war, police needed to know whether Precious had any gang ties.
And did y'all know if Precious may have been, involved with any gangs or maybe hung out with the wrong crowd, maybe?
But loved ones insist that wasn't part of Precious's life.
I knew Precious from the time she was 18 until she was killed. And I have never heard any of Precious's friends or family members ever mention her being in a gang.
She was a caregiver trying to make herself as a good homemaker. And that was her direction. Any kind of gang activity or anything else wasn't really on her radar.
While Precious seems like an unlikely target for gang violence, her sister Brianna does reveal something troubling.
Listen, you need to just stop calling my phone. I ain't got nothing to do with you and her, okay?
Precious had been getting threats for a few weeks.
And Brianna says just before the murder, they escalated.
You want to come after me with a gun now?
Who is that?
Don't worry about it.
Brianna overheard in a phone conversation that Precious was having that there would be gun violence and she would be involved in it.
Stop calling my phone.
When investigators ask Brianna whether she knew who was behind the menacing call, her answer is surprising.
She claimed it all started with Sierra Douglas.
Sierra Douglas, the very woman that police had taken into custody earlier that night on an unrelated warrant charge. A woman who admitted to having a relationship with Precious, but had already lied to police once that night.
But what else did friends and family know about Sierra's relationship with Precious?
Can we take you over here to ask you some more questions?
According to Precious's ex-girlfriend, Mercedes Warren, when she and Precious split, neither could imagine ever finding love again.
We were equally sad. We equally missed each other.
Then, one day in 2013, Precious finally met someone who filled the void in her heart.
Can I get a light?
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Not a problem.
I'm Precious.
Sierra.
After ending a relationship with a boyfriend of 5 years, Sierra was on the rebound and looking to have some fun.
Enjoying the party?
Yeah. Are you?
I am now. Precious was so attractive and so fun and so flirtatious that women wanted to talk to her and wanted to be around her and wanted to enjoy her personality.
As Precious and Sierra's relationship deepened, apparently neither woman saw it as a short-term fling.
Sierra had a child, and the thought of possibly getting to help someone raise a child was very exciting to Precious.
Though the 2-year-old little boy was living with Sierra's mother in Arizona at the time, they talked about what would happen when he came home.
But not everyone was content with the couple's newfound happiness.
Allegedly, Sierra's baby daddy and ex-boyfriend, Corey Hill, was pretty upset about the situation.
Not only was he being rejected by Sierra, but Precious Jackson had taken his place.
This may have been a little bit damaging to this gentleman's ego.
Mercedes tells detectives that in the weeks leading up to Precious's death, Precious had been receiving threats from Corey for her own safety. Precious's loved ones had urged her to end the relationship with Sierra, but like Precious had done all her life, she refused to abandon the woman she loved because of a bully's threats.
Instead, Precious moved with Sierra into the Laurel Place apartments, a place where she believed Corey would be able to find her.
Could this case, which once appeared to be gang-related, really be a love triangle gone wrong? Police aren't sure.
Thank you for your time, man.
Sorry for your loss, all right.
Soon after talking to Precious's family, police were able to determine that the other 2 shootings in Portland were not related to this particular shooting.
But if this murder was just about Corey Hill being jealous, there was a lot they could not put their finger on.
Why had a group of masked men shown up the night that Precious was shot? And how was Antonio Sanders involved? Or was he?
In a case with more questions than answers, one witness is about to drop an enormous bombshell.
She revealed the man's identity, and they were floored.
Surfaced that Corey Hill, Sierra Douglas's ex, was deeply jealous of Sierra's relationship with Precious Jackson. Portland detectives must now consider one more possible motive for Precious's murder.
There's a love triangle going on, and someone has been rejected.
But if that was the motive for the crime, then who were these masked men that showed up at the murder scene that night? And how was local gang member Antonio Sanders involved, if at all?
Hoping to learn more, investigators turned to Sierra Douglas, who was about to be released for the outstanding warrant charge.
It turned out there was a mistake, and the arrest warrant for Sierra was no longer active. Detectives were hoping that under less tense circumstances, she would be more cooperative.
But when confronted with the allegations made by Precious's family and friends regarding Corey Hill, Sierra becomes defensive.
You're not saying Corey did this?
Sierra says when she met Corey at the tender age of 15, he was a rising boxing star.
Corey was a 3-time Tacoma Golden Glove champion, 2009, 10, and 11. Would come to the gym, watch him practice. She would go to his fights. Corey was very happy with Sierra. It was a perfect fit.
Then, 1 year into their relationship, Corey and Sierra got shocking news. Sierra was pregnant.
Corey was overwhelmed and having a child. That's natural.
But Sierra says what Corey did next put their family's future in jeopardy.
Corey had stopped coming to practice. He made some bad decisions because of outside influences.
He eventually, hooked up with the Hoover gang.
By 2012, he had done time for drug charges. and his relationship with Sierra was over.
So he's in that Hooper gang. Did that make you think there's going to be a problem? We still are trying to figure out what happened.
Sierra begins to open up and says that on the night of November 1st, when she had just finished doing some laundry, a group of masked men approached her.
Sierra says when one of the men moved to adjust his orange bandana, she immediately recognized him.
It was Corey Hill.
There was a verbal altercation and some threatening words.
Precious Jackson can hear the commotion from upstairs, where she's smoking a cigarette.
Miss Jackson came down the stairs to make sure that Miss Douglas was safe.
If Sierra in any way felt threatened, Precious would stand up for her because that's how she was. She was a protector.
Precious jumps in and pushes Corey Hill.
That's when Sierra says a man wearing a ski mask got up in Precious's face.
She didn't stand a chance.
Corey Hill's violent past and his presence at the murder would seem to bolster the argument that Precious's death was a crime of revenge. But for investigators, there are a few facts that still don't fit.
If this was Corey Hill's personal vendetta against Precious, then why had the man wearing the ski mask pulled the trigger and not him?
As for the latter question, detectives believe one man also gang member, Antonio Sanders.
Perhaps it was no mere coincidence that he was in that neighborhood that night.
But Antonio had a very specific alibi. He said he was visiting a friend in the neighborhood and had gotten a ride there on the city's number 9 bus.
However, that very specificity turns out to be Antonio's undoing.
Our municipal bus system all has surveillance cameras. They check all the surveillance cameras, and guess what? No Antonio Sanders.
Investigators know there's one person who can provide the answers they need: Corey Hill. On November 19th, they locate Corey at his home and haul him into the station for questioning.
Today, what I'm here to talk to you about is just what you know, because I know you were there.
But under withering questioning, Corey refuses to play ball.
You don't know anything about that? Okay, so did you know Precious?
No, I didn't.
Never met Precious? Do you know anything about Precious?
He said he didn't know that Sierra was dating anybody else, and he hadn't seen Sierra in a long time.
When's the last time you saw Sierra?
It's been a while.
Do you remember when?
Not exactly.
Was Sierra dating somebody else?
I had my own girlfriend, so.
What time?
So I had my own relationships, I really don't know.
He also said that he didn't know anybody named Antonio Sanders.
Just say I'm lying. You want other people to speak for you. What about Mr. Sanders? What's he gonna say? He's in the same car that you're in, so don't tell me who's that. He's in the same car that you're in. Don't know. So all you've done so far is lie.
Though police feel confident Corey Hill is lying to them, they aren't ready to press charges.
Without knowing more about his role in the commission of the crime, they didn't even know what he was guilty of. Conspiracy to commit murder, accessory after the fact.
Since Corey is currently on parole, police are able to hold him at the station while they continue investigating the case.
He has been on parole for an unlawful weapons possession, so they're able to detain him.
But what detectives need right now is a hard piece of evidence that ties Corey and Antonio to the same location. It's back at the crime scene that police spot a potential opportunity.
The apartment complex had surveillance video.
When investigators review the footage, it confirms that 2 vehicles entered the parking lot at about 1:30 a.m. And these were the same 2 vehicles seen fleeing the parking lot a few moments later. And even more importantly, it showed among these men at least one of them wearing a bandana. And based on Sierra's earlier account, police believe that one of these men was Corey Hill.
As for the trigger man, he's also present and wearing a ski mask in the footage, just like Sierra told police.
He's wearing a white shirt, dark jeans, and black and white Adidas, and also wearing a coat.
That's exactly what Antonio Sanders was wearing the night he was apprehended, minus the coat.
the shooter is Antonio Sanders.
Inch by inch, detectives move closer to solving the crime. But when a lady of the night comes calling, it might just provide the final missing piece to this unnerving puzzle.
Every time I think about it, I get this weird feeling in my stomach. It makes me sick. It's disgusting.
Thanks to newly surfaced surveillance footage, detectives in Portland, Oregon feel certain that gang members Corey Hill and Antonio Sanders were both present when Precious Jackson was gunned down at her apartment complex. But what detectives still don't know is did Antonio act alone when he pulled the trigger, or at the behest of his fellow gang member, Corey Hill?
At this point, neither one of these men is cooperating with police. They hope that finding some of the other masked men involved in the crime would help put the pieces together, but they can't find them.
It was dead end after dead end.
Then investigators get what looks like a lucky break.
Is that you, detective?
A woman named Sophie Keys comes forward, claiming to have dirt on Antonio Sanders and Corey Hill.
She had kind of a paid-for-hire sexual relationship with Antonio Sanders. And every time that Antonio Sanders was with Sophie Keys, Antonio Sanders also had his best friend Corey Hill with him.
You don't see one without the other.
According to Sophie, in the last few weeks, she had overheard numerous conversations between the two gang members, some of which she claims were heated.
During those conversations, Hill was agitated, more than agitated, enraged oftentimes around the relationship that Sierra began to engage in with Precious.
As a member of the Hoovers, he does not want to be looked upon as not a powerful person. To have his child's mother leave him and then be with a woman takes that away from him.
Sophie claims that in the hours before Precious's murder, Corey Hill's anger boiled to a climax.
Some people, man, might be trying to start some trouble. We need to go handle them. It's a chick, man. It's a chick, and I think we need to go and we need to mess that bitch up, man. Man, I told you, I ain't got no beef with that lady. Yeah, you do. She go in the 60s, dog. That's what's up. Damn! Why you ain't say that before?
Corey Hill had to come up with a rationale that would be palatable to Antonio Sanders. Corey Hill framed it that Precious Jackson was a rival gang member, a rolling 60s Crip.
So he's believing that where they're going to be getting a point across possible rival gang members.
Even though that was untrue at the end of the day.
You down? Yeah, man, I'm down. Yeah, come on, man.
For detectives, Sophie's allegations are a game-changing revelation.
Corey Hill is really the mastermind of this killing.
He essentially used Antonio as his pawn in a love triangle.
In light of the new evidence and testimony, on November 21st, Antonio Sanders and Corey Hill are charged with Precious Jackson's murder.
I was still sad and devastated. Just because you arrest somebody doesn't bring Precious back.
As the case heads to trial, detectives continue gathering evidence against the two men.
They sent the orange bandana that they found in the suspect's getaway car and the ski mask that they found thrown out from that vehicle in for DNA testing.
When they test the orange bandana for DNA, it comes back to Corey Hill. They test that ski mask for DNA, and the DNA comes back to Antonio Sanders.
And when you have that DNA evidence, now that's the nail getting hammered into the coffin.
Not long after, defense attorneys approach the prosecution about making a possible plea.
There's a lot that goes into trying a case. It is expensive, it takes a lot of time, and when you have gang members involved, there's always a possibility that some of the witnesses are going to be threatened, and the Portland police and the DA cannot protect every witness.
In the end, prosecutors decide to offer both defendants a reduced charge of first-degree manslaughter.
Antonio Sanders would serve a sentence of 18 years. Corey would serve 12.
Corey's proposed sentence was much shorter because police could not prove that the murder was premeditated and because he did not pull the trigger.
I advise Corey that was very, very lenient. What they could have done was a lot worse than that.
Both men took the plea.
Those close to Precious feel her killers got off easy.
I personally think if you shoot someone in the back and that person is running away from you, you should never see the light of day again, ever.
Precious is gone forever. But you can come out when you're 40. I feel like they should be locked away for life.
Each day her loved ones must struggle with the knowledge that the world lost a wonderful woman, all because of one man's senseless jealousy.
It was just heartbreaking. Nobody should lose their life over something as silly as, I don't want you dating my ex-girlfriend. It's still very hard for us to talk about because we still feel like she should be here.
Besides, like, my mom, like, I've never had nobody, like, stand up for me the way she has. They love me the way she has. I feel like the world's awesome and amazing.
Tôi ra biển rồi, tôi cứ thấy tôi bơi.
Ôi trời ơi, tôi thấy đã ăn cái kẹo ngon.
Nhớ sao này. Mày.
Tôi hết đường ra đây rồi.
Hả? Không biết nữa. Nói bừa à. Nói cho người khác thôi sao mình cũng không biết là quay đây à. Vậy đâu.
Nhưng mà mày bóc mà, sao tao phải đợi?
Tao bóc không phải.
Mày làm phải.
Ê. Ý kiến á. Không nói gì. Lạnh. Mong này hả? Mà phải chắc chắn á, trời. Đấy. Thằng Nguyên kia nó cười cả buổi chiều, giờ mới năm 2 sao? Tôi ngủ đi. Hả? À không. Hả? Không. Phai phai. file file sống ra thành điện thoại. Sao gì? Cái con này file file vậy. Nói vậy thôi xong tôi tắm cái không này chơi xong Zero Mirror cái mới hả? Không hay nhìn qua lối cách chơi thì không hợp không thích. Ok thôi đây nhầm để sửa lộn đó biết lộn này thôi để từ này thôi này đi cái mặt một vài người lắp lấy lại dẹp sẽ thân này thôi. Má ơi mỏi tay quá dám quay được cái nhà cày giờ đây phát là về nhà rồi. Thì mất đống vàng mới nhặt được thêm cái áo da có bảo vệ khỏi vật bắn ra 4 đi đẹp là được. Màu tím hả? Kim cương à? Bữa tôi thấy chỗ có kim cương mà nhưng mà giờ đấy mình không biết cách để đào ra nên là thôi toàn cho con nổ mà đấy. Giờ phải cất chỗ đồ vàng đang cầm này nè. Hả? Chứ có cái gì hot nữa đâu ngoài vàng với kim cương. Okay. Tới đâu hay tới đâu à? Con kệ tới đâu hay tới đó mà biết sao giờ. Mít lag kìa. Mít. Hả? Không biết nữa. Như thế không tìm hiểu được chưa, ý kiến đi coi gì. Mấy cái đồ đấy người ta không thích dùng để đào nên tôi đã thử bao giờ nên mà biết quậy người không. Yêu kỳ 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 hê ê ế thôi chán quá rồi tự dưng chán game nhà này. Ôi dừng được rồi. Ôi giời ơi, kiệt sức quá rồi. Ok, nay chơi game thế là quá đủ. Ủa? Vãi rồi, con 18